If you've spent any time learning about MBTI, you've probably noticed something strange. The same cognitive function can seem completely different depending on which personality type is using it. So which description is actually correct? The answer is all of them. Let's find out why. Part 1. Understanding the function. Extraverted thinking is the cognitive function that asks a simple question. What works? It is concerned with taking ideas and turning them into results that can be measured in the real world. While some functions spend most of their time exploring possibilities, understanding people, or reflecting on personal meaning, extroverted thinking is focused on execution. It wants progress. It wants movement. It wants to know whether something is effective. This function naturally pays attention to systems, methods, evidence, and efficiency. It notices how resources are being used, where time is being wasted, and what changes could improve the outcome. Rather than asking whether something feels right, extroverted thinking asks whether it accomplishes its goal. If two methods reach the same destination, it will usually favor the one that gets there faster, more reliably, or with fewer unnecessary steps. Because of this, extroverted thinking often organizes the outside world. It creates schedules, establishes procedures, delegates responsibilities, and sets measurable goals. It enjoys taking something messy and bringing order to it so that everyone knows what needs to happen next. One important thing to understand is that extroverted thinking is not obsessed with control for its own sake. Control is simply a tool. If organizing people or creating structure leads to better results, it will do that. If giving people complete freedom produces better results, it can do that too. Its loyalty is to effectiveness, not to a particular style of leadership. This function also relies heavily on objective feedback. It wants information that can be tested against reality. Did the project succeed? Did productivity improve? Did the solution actually solve the problem? Personal opinions matter, but extroverted thinking tends to place greater trust in evidence that can be observed and verified. That leads to one of the biggest misconceptions about this function. Many people assume extroverted thinking is cold, bossy, or uncaring. In reality, those traits are not built into the function itself. Someone using extroverted thinking can be incredibly kind or incredibly harsh, depending on the rest of their personality and values. The function simply prioritizes effectiveness when making decisions. Another misconception is that extroverted thinking only belongs in business or management. In reality, it appears anywhere people solve practical problems. A parent creating routines for their children, a student planning their semester, a mechanic troubleshooting an engine, or a doctor following an efficient treatment protocol can all be using extroverted thinking. At its core, this function gives the mind a way to transform intention into action. It asks, how do we make this happen? The answer to that question feels very different depending on where extroverted thinking appears in the cognitive stack. Part 2. Hero Function. The hero position belongs to ENTJ and ESTJ. When extroverted thinking is the hero function, it becomes the person's most trusted way of interacting with the world. They instinctively believe that problems can be solved through action, organization, and better systems. When something isn't working, their first response is usually not to dwell on it, but to improve it. These individuals often feel energized by taking charge of situations that lack direction. If a group has no plan, they naturally begin creating one. If responsibilities are unclear, they start assigning them. If a process is inefficient, they immediately begin thinking of ways to streamline it. What makes the hero position unique is its confidence. They generally don't spend much time questioning whether extroverted thinking is the right tool. It simply feels obvious. If something needs to be accomplished, organize it. Measure progress. Remove obstacles. Keep moving. Imagine a group project where everyone is talking but nothing is getting done. The hero user is often the person who says, okay, here's what we're doing. You handle this, I'll handle this, let's meet again tomorrow. To them, this isn't controlling. It's simply the fastest path toward success. Because they trust this function so deeply, they often become very effective at managing large amounts of work. They can juggle deadlines, coordinate teams, and keep long-term projects moving even when motivation fades. They understand that consistency often matters more than inspiration. However, complete trust also creates blind spots. Hero users may assume everyone values efficiency as much as they do. They can become frustrated when others prioritize emotions, exploration, or personal reflection over immediate results. They may unintentionally dismiss concerns that seem irrelevant to accomplishing the objective. Sometimes they also overestimate how much structure is actually needed. If every problem looks like a logistical problem, they may miss situations where relationships, morale, or individual values require more attention than optimization. Still, when healthy, hero extroverted thinking provides tremendous momentum. These individuals often inspire confidence because they appear capable of taking difficult situations and moving them toward practical solutions. They remind others that ideas become meaningful when they can actually be put into practice. That same function takes on a different role when it moves into the parent position. Part 3. Parent function. The parent position belongs to INTJ and ISTJ. The parent function is still strong and confident, but its purpose changes. Instead of asking, "How can I accomplish this?" it often asks, "How can I help others accomplish this?" Extroverted thinking in the parent position carries a strong sense of responsibility. These individuals often feel obligated to be dependable, organized, and competent because they don't want other people suffering from unnecessary confusion or poor planning. Rather than taking over every situation, they frequently provide guidance that helps others become more effective themselves. They might teach someone a better workflow, explain how to organize a complicated task, or quietly solve logistical problems before anyone else even notices them. Imagine someone struggling to assemble furniture because the instructions are confusing. The parent user may not immediately grab the tools and finish it themselves. Instead, they are more likely to explain the process step by step so the other person understands how it works. Their satisfaction often comes from making someone else more capable. This position tends to balance confidence with restraint. They know they can organize a situation, but they also recognize that people need room to learn and develop. As a result, their use of extroverted thinking often feels calmer and more measured than the hero position. Because responsibility is so central here, these individuals can become frustrated when people repeatedly ignore practical advice or create avoidable problems. They may feel that if a better system already exists, refusing to use it only creates unnecessary work for everyone involved. At times, they may also place too much pressure on themselves to always be competent. Asking for help can feel uncomfortable because they believe they should already know how to solve the problem. Their confidence is real, but it is paired with a quiet sense of duty that pushes them to maintain high standards. When healthy, parent extroverted thinking becomes a stabilizing force. It creates order not to gain authority, but to support people and make life run more smoothly. That sense of responsibility becomes much lighter when extroverted thinking appears as the child function. Part 4. Child function. The child position belongs to ENFP and ESFP. When extroverted thinking occupies the child position, it often feels playful, exciting, and surprisingly enjoyable. These individuals genuinely like being productive when they're in the mood, and they often take pride in moments where they can demonstrate competence. Unlike the hero or parent positions, however, this confidence isn't always consistent. It tends to appear in bursts. One day they may enthusiastically organize an entire room, create a detailed schedule, or optimize a project simply because it sounds fun. The next day they may lose interest entirely and move on to something else that captures their attention. There is an innocence to how they use this function. They often enjoy crossing items off a checklist, building something that works, or finding clever shortcuts that save time. Productivity itself can become satisfying, almost like a game. Imagine someone discovering a new budgeting app. They might spend hours organizing every expense, creating colorful categories, and proudly showing everyone how much more efficient their finances have become. Whether they keep using it 6 months later is another question entirely. Because the child function is still developing, it can also be a little overconfident. Sometimes they believe they've completely solved a problem after only understanding part of it. Other times they become excited about efficiency without considering whether the system will actually be sustainable. Criticism of their competence can sting more than they expect. Since this function represents something they enjoy and want to feel good at, being told they handled something poorly may feel surprisingly personal. Fortunately, the child position also grows quickly through positive experiences. Every successful project, every completed goal, and every practical achievement strengthens their confidence. Over time, they often become much more comfortable turning their creativity into consistent action. Eventually, this journey brings us to the most complicated relationship with extroverted thinking, the inferior position. Part 5. Inferior Function. The inferior position belongs to INFP and ISFP. When extroverted thinking is inferior, it often becomes both deeply admired and deeply intimidating. These individuals usually recognize the value of organization, efficiency, and objective decision-making. They often wish they could access those qualities more effortlessly, yet trusting themselves to do so can feel surprisingly difficult. Many people with inferior extroverted thinking spend a great deal of time worrying about whether they're actually competent. They may second-guess their ability to make practical decisions, manage responsibilities, or meet external expectations. Even when they perform well, they may quietly wonder whether they simply got lucky. Because they don't naturally trust this function, making objective decisions can become stressful. They may spend a long time reflecting internally before finally acting, wanting to be absolutely certain they're making the right choice. Ironically, this often means other people underestimate how capable they really are. Once these individuals commit to a decision, they are frequently much more organized and effective than they expected themselves to be. Stress creates another interesting pattern. During overwhelming situations, inferior extroverted thinking may suddenly overcompensate. Someone who usually dislikes rigid structure might become unusually controlling, impatient, or obsessed with getting everything done immediately. They may begin making harsh, black and white decisions simply because they feel desperate to restore order. These moments usually don't reflect who they truly are. Instead, they reveal someone reaching for a function they haven't fully learned to trust under pressure. The encouraging part is that the inferior function represents enormous potential for growth. Every time these individuals successfully organize a project, make a difficult decision, or prove to themselves that they can handle real-world responsibilities, their confidence grows a little stronger. Unlike the hero position, they may never experience extroverted thinking as effortless, but because they have to consciously develop it, they often gain a thoughtful appreciation for balance. They learn that efficiency matters, but so do values. Results matter, but so do people. Practical action doesn't have to replace compassion. It can become one more way of expressing it. In many ways, that is what makes the inferior function so powerful. It begins as a source of insecurity, becomes a lifelong teacher, and eventually develops into one of the most meaningful forms of personal growth a person can experience. By now, hopefully you've seen that this cognitive function never actually changed. Whether it appeared as the hero, parent, child, or inferior function, it was always the same underlying cognitive process. What changed was the person's relationship with it. One position trusted it instinctively, another used it to support others, another approached it with comfort and curiosity, and another admired it while struggling to fully trust it. In the next video, we'll continue by exploring how this same cognitive function appears in the shadow through the nemesis, critic, trickster, and demon functions.